Alright, so I'm about to start taking apart the front suspension and then cutting out the hangers to install the Dave's Customs YJ full width axle kit. Pretty slick unit, so you just cut off these mounts. There's DOM too that slips through, and then it bolts straight on. The mount bolts straight on where the steering box would be, and then you just buzz it in and it just moves it out the 1/4 inch that it needs. And the one back here you just have to cut out, clamp a new one in, buzz it in. Seems pretty straightforward, pretty simple kit. That's all that comes in it. But then I'll be able to bolt my Chevy axle directly up to it. Here's an update. Just got the new ball joints and new rotors in on the 10 bolt. I used the older style brake because this steel is so thick, it's going to protect it. Still need to cut the mounts off the rear. Alright, I got the front axle pulled, cut the U-bolts for the leaf springs. Now I just gotta slide it out, start cutting. Before I start cutting, I'm gonna measure, well not measure, but mark where the center line of this bolt hole, as well as this bolt hole. That way I can kind of line it up when time comes to weld everything back together. Well, 3 days later, we're working on about 3 or 4 hours a day, 2, 3. Finally got all the brackets cut off, including the track bar bracket, because that's not going back on. Talk about a waste of engineering. So we are bare. I still need to grind them down, clean them up. But I think it's gonna be pretty sweet. I'm gonna grab the mount, we'll see how it looks. Alright, so here's the bracket on the front. So this is pretty sweet. So they have a DOM sleeve that fits in this hole. And this actually bolts. Let's see if I can. This actually bolts to the frame, and then you just buzz it in place. And that outboards the spring your 1/2 inch. Definitely gonna need to clean up the area, but that's the front. And then here's the rear again. And this just slides up in there. You clamp it in place and weld her in. Pretty solid design. These are super thick. I think it's going to work out really well. This is the hardware for the driver's side. Pretty simple. I did have to bore out the holes on each side. Did have to bore out the holes on each side just a little bit, but she fits in there now. So it seems pretty straightforward. in the instructions, it specifically says not to drop this DOM sleeve in the hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-place the bolt through, slide it in, and then slide the DOM sleeve over. That way it can't fall in. Just going to tighten her up. This is to push it up into the frame, tack her in place. Well, I'll push it up into the frame and then tighten it. Next. And then we have to clamp this into place. Got this girl installed. Had to take it off and grind this down just slightly. Kind of accidentally took off a little bit too much, but I think it'll be fine. But that way it'd fit up in there, and then this bottom piece is touching. And I have the rear clamped into place. I'm going to temp install the leaf spring and make sure she looks good, and then tack them into place. Here she is installed. Perfect. All of the mounts are welded in. Threw some primer on them. Process was fairly simple, although it does help that I have the motor trans removed. One thing it didn't really say in the instructions, I had to remove this steering box. I probably could have done it without removing the steering box, but I didn't have a torch or a plasma cutter, so in order to get my grinder in there, I had to. But should be pretty sweet. We'll let this dry for a few hours, powder some black on it, and call it a day. Well, here she is, bolted in the stock Chevy mounts. Just pretty sweet. I flipped the center pin on the leaf spring, and one of them was pretty bad, so I just went and got a 5/16 grade 8 bolts that were the same size. Ground the head down circle, and she should work pretty well. But I'm pretty excited. It just bolted right in. No fighting it or anything. So I'm gonna go grab the tires I have and throw it on. This thing looks awesome. It is way taller because it's spring over. Look at how wide that is now. It looks 6-7 inches wider just on one side.